You okay?
Gotta have this out here for when.
Oh, smart. Come on.
What do you do? I'm covered in DEET.
Ooh, you okay?
I sprayed my legs and my arms. It's everywhere but my face.
That's awesome.
Oh, the mosquitoes here are no.
Beautiful.
They will fly you away.
They will pick you up and show you love. Yeah.
Very uncool.
Like you've never seen. Ever seen.
Drink called The Bitter Root. That's the book that David's been working on. And it has root beer. What is in it, Lisa?
Huh?
You're asking what the
cost.
It's got it's bourbon, sweet vermouth, and sarsaparilla bitters.
Oh, I bet that's so good.
Pretty good.
I haven't had it yet.
Drink
Pretty.
it.
Y'all look so nice. You clean up good.
Right.
Oh, thanks, David.
Publish now.
But where's David?
He's logging in.
Oh.
We can talk a little bit before he comes on.
Yeah, 2 minutes. Yeah, it's kind of cool if they show up like, I'm so cool, here I am.
Right?
I got here, I had to get out from all those women. Out from under all those women.
Out from under all the ladies. Now, where's my... Oh, that's my phone. I just want to check in. It's only letting me watch, not participate. That's interesting.
Oh, well, we do. Is it that we have to set him? Oh, he's not even in as an attendee.
Oh, let's try and can we invite? I hope everybody is enjoying us figuring this out right now.
We are live on YouTube.
Invite.
Gmail? Here we go.
Oh, it's got to open this whole thing up. Wow.
Hang on. We're trying.
Give me his. Oh, there it is. DF Walker 68. Oh. This is the email.
I think that's it. Yeah, let's try that.
Send.
It's so odd.
Listen, if this to go make another margarita, so
Right.
Where's Zoom? There it is.
Right there. Okay, let's see if this works. Just sent to you. So odd. New email. Something happened? No. So,
there's not some limit that's like, because I'm here, he can't be here, right?
I don't think so.
Should we all be able to pop in here? I mean, we do the
Yeah, I mean, we just sent him an invitation. We'll see what happens.
All right.
No.
It's what happens when Casey Franks and Nichelle are both out of town.
Yeah.
We got to do it ourselves, and
We're terrible at it.
isn't necessarily our job.
Yeah. It is not our area of expertise, as you can clearly see.
I need Casey to come help. Do you need his help? He's right here.
Oh, there's an attendee.
Oh, wait.
He said we will now promote
To
panelists.
panelists. Yay!
Let's see.
just up there. We go.
Turn on video.
Ask to say.
Yay!
Oh my gosh, we figured it out.
I'm glad you figured it out, because there was no way I was going to do it.
Same. I mean, not same. We had to figure it out.
We figured it out.
Yes, look at
Together.
someone's got a new hairdo.
Kelly Sue got back.
Thanks.
That looks really good.
Thank you. Many people have told me that I look like Mia Wallace.
Just a
Which
little
I-
bit.
Yeah, which I take as a compliment.
Yeah.
That and Lydia Dietz. They're basically two of my heroes. So
Do I know who Lydia Dietz is? I don't know.
Beetlejuice.
No, I don't think so.
Winona Ryder and Beetlejuice. Come on.
Oh no, no,
Beetlejuice.
brighter Beetlejuice.
Oh, wait a sec. That's the Tim Burton movie. I haven't seen that since the day it came out. I don't think any of you were born yet. So,
I saw it in the movie theater.
okay.
I didn't see it in the movie theater, but I rented it.
It depends on the year.
On VHS.
Do we know what year it came out?
87, 88 maybe?
Yeah, somewhere in the
Cool.
late 80s.
So I
Yeah.
was about 3. I could have been anywhere between 3 and 5.
Okay.
Theater.
Yeah, no,
definitely saw it when I
But
was
we
2
were.
years
That means that we were all born. when it
We
came
were
out.
all
Okay.
born.
But one see
At the very least, we were born.
Yeah,
because there was a Broadway musical of Juice.
it's true.
And it was
So
kind
this wasn't that Christina Ricci? No, who was in that movie?
Winona Ryder.
Was it
Winona
Winona?
Ryder. Christina
Really?
Ricci was
Mermaids.
Mermaids
With that was Winona Ryder and Christina
Ricci
and Cher
and Cher.
Okay.
and
Oh,
dude from Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Oh yeah.
what is his
Bob
name?
Hoskins?
Bob Hoskins.
Nailed it. Nailed it.
This is what this entire episode is going to be about.
Just
Like, remember the cast of Mermaids?
I never saw Mermaids.
Oh, it's fantastic.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. I'm hit or miss with Cher. You know,
Cher.
she can.
Cher as a
Like
music.
Moonstruck.
I'm like,
Moonstruck's good, and Mask is good,
yes.
and
Everything else I can kind of come and go with. I'm like, I don't know.
I've never seen Silkwood. Wasn't she in Silkwood?
She wasn't Silkwood.
I didn't see that one.
I mean, it's
Still,
nothing you don't already know.
yeah.
What, Mermaids is nothing I don't already
No,
know? Or?
Silkwood.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say because
Oh no, wait. Was Cher wasn't Witches of Eastwick?
Yes.
She was.
she was. It was her and Michelle Pfeiffer and Susan Sarandon, right?
That movie.
Yeah.
Great.
One. Really good.
I haven't seen that one in forever. That's like.
Oh man. You know what? Instead of doing this, why don't we just watch it?
Yeah.
All together right now.
Well, you know what's funny is that I've been going back watching some stuff that I haven't seen in like 20 or 30 or more like 30 years or more, and that's not a smart thing to do. Like, because a lot of times these movies don't hold up, and then you're like
You don't.
cursing yourself, and yeah.
You know what I'm more fascinated by now is the movies that do hold up. I'm like,
Yes.
wow, it's been like 30 years and this is still really good. And then the ones that don't, you're like, oh my, how did this ever get made?
Yeah.
God. We've been watching a lot of those recently.
Well, there's also a lot to be said for nostalgia too, right? So sometimes, you know, it's like maybe a movie isn't as good as you thought, but you saw it when you were 9 or 10, and yeah, because I do that.
And through 9 or 10-year-old like non-critical eyes when you were
man.
just a wee babe and you
Yeah.
didn't know anything about the world. This
Mhm.
was a great movie.
Rockadoodle was a great movie.
I don't even know anything about that.
Don't ever watch it. If you haven't seen it, never watch it.
It's,
Okay.
Yeah,
Don
there's
Bluth.
nothing. There's nothing. It is Don Bluth, who I love. Don Bluth, Secret of Nim,
Yeah.
American Tail.
Rockadoodle. But Rockadoodle is about a rooster who leaves the farm and becomes like Elvis.
Yes, I remember it now. I did not watch it, but I do remember it happening.
And his name is Chanticleer.
Wow, I've never.
So
I realize I know nothing about that movie. That's
Don't need
Rockadoodle maybe more than one time.
being like, I must.
we don't have to talk about how many times I've seen it.
Rockadoodle. Okay.
Yeah.
I
Anyway.
probably won't watch it, but you know, well, because Kelly, so you've already heard my last what is it? The Last Unicorn
Oh.
tale. I think you've heard it, right?
You have told me that. It's
Okay, yeah.
a terrible
It's a horrible story.
memory,
Yeah.
Movie.
to have associated with such a wonderful movie.
I didn't hear this story.
Well,
but
now
I
you
guess,
have to
like,
tell
I
it,
don't
David.
know if you want to talk about it on YouTube Live to all of the probably like 2 or 3 people.
2 or
that
3 people who are watching.
this
Oh,
thing.
I
We don't
mean,
have
We don't
Patreon
have-
open.
Like, yeah, we don't have anything open. So.
Fair.
I
But if you're willing to share,
Please do.
I will share the story.
Pretty good
Lindley, or do you want to hear it?
Do.
Okay, because you're on delay, right? So you say stuff, and then it shows like your head's moving and your mouth's moving, and then the words come out.
sounds like you have a wonderful internet connection.
Yeah, it sounds like
Outside.
it's
I
like
do
a kung fu movie. So
It's doing that thing. Lynn, you know what I think is happening? I think you might have the thing on your Zoom where it cancels out sound when other people are talking or it pauses you. I think you might have that.
Mhm.
you love how I'm talking about it like it itself is a virus? It is.
So you want to hear my last dragon story? Not last dragon, excuse me, last unicorn story.
Last Dragon is a fucking great movie. I
Yes,
hope
it
you
is.
have traumatic
I was
memories.
just talking about that today.
Okay.
Last Dragon is classic. So Last Unicorn, I was in this relationship with this woman, and it was New Year's Eve, and we didn't know what we were going to do. We were trying to figure out. We'd been invited to a couple parties, but she wasn't feeling good. She wanted to stay home, and I said okay. And somehow she decided that we should watch The Last Unicorn, which I had never seen before, but it was one of her childhood favorites. And I was a little bit hesitant to watch it with her because watching movies with her was not a good experience a lot of the time. Um, and so we spend New Year's Eve, and I should backtrack a little bit. I've never had a really good New Year's Eve ever. And I've especially never had a romantic New Year's Eve when I'm with someone that I'm involved with in a relationship. But I kind of thought,
Sucks. Side note.
yeah. So we were watching The Last Unicorn, and keep in mind that I've never seen this movie,
Mhm.
and I'm a grown ass man, 40 something years old, and I see it. I can appreciate it for what it is, but there's no 10-year-old in me that's like, oh, I mean. And so she just is like crying through most of the movie, and just she's reverted back to her lost youth. And when it was over, she looks at me and she goes, "Wasn't that the most beautiful movie you've ever seen?" And there's tears running down her cheeks. And I said, "Yeah, that's pretty good." And she said, "You didn't love it?" And I said, "Well, I liked it a lot." And then we got into a fight over The Last Unicorn, which literally lasted 2 weeks. Yeah. Yeah. I can't believe you didn't like that movie. That what's wrong with you? And we'd be in the middle of something else a couple days later, and then she would be like, "I can't talk to you. You didn't like The Last Unicorn." And it was like, and it was never jokingly. And so I think that might have been the last movie we actually watched together, even though we were together a significantly longer time after that. But I learned a valuable lesson.
In the business, like to call a red flag.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 Oh, there was.
Or that,
Definitely.
like in hindsight, there were a lot of them before that moment.
Oh, there were so many red flags before that moment,
Mhm.
and at
Mhm.
that point, I was just kicking myself in the ass. It was like, because you hit that point where you are at a certain age where you're like, okay, if this relationship falls apart, I'm done. I'm never going to get another one, and this is the best I can get, and which is what she would remind me of pretty regularly, that it was never going to be better than her, and and so yeah, there's a lot of red flags, and so The Last Unicorn,
Wow.
I've never.
Better than having a 2-week-long fight about how you didn't like The Last Unicorn enough.
Well, because, and the reason the fight lasted so long was because she did not believe in agreeing to disagree. So she had this hard line it wasn't even the sand. It was like in steel laced concrete is where the line was, which was no agreeing to disagree.
Wow.
That's what we in the biz call the second red flag.
Yeah. There were so many. I didn't know I didn't know you at the time. If I had known you at the time.
Yeah.
This is a beautiful segue into introducing who you are.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Hey,
that's
everyone.
right.
Hi, guys. Welcome to Meet Me in the Hex. We are here with Lindley, who is in Texas. There she is. And our special guest, David Walker,
Texas, huh?
who is a man's man, man about town, Renaissance man, out of Portland, Oregon.
Oregon, yes.
Um,
Oregon.
That's where they have a lot of rain.
Jess.
And
Markets.
yeah,
Yes. and tons of comics people.
Lots of comics
Yes.
people, lots of beautiful nature,
Mhm.
Yep.
Lots of beautiful comics people.
delicious foods.
Yeah.
And David is the writer of many, many, many incredible things that you should read immediately. I want to put them all in the notes of this show. But one of our favorites is Bitterroot.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. And we've created a cocktail, and by we, I mean Lisa, called the Bitterroot.
Okay.
Featuring 2 ounces bourbon. For anybody at home who has these ingredients, 2 ounces bourbon, a half ounce sweet vermouth, and 3 dashes sarsaparilla bitters.
Because it is a root and it is bitter.
There you go. That is.
And we almost called them the Bitterroot Manhattans,
But then we decided to just call it the bitter.
the Bitterroot.
The bitter
Why
root.
do we need to bring Manhattan into this?
We don't need to bring Manhattan into this.
It's not needed right now.
Overrated.
Not needed at all.
So, like I said, David has written incredible things. And one of the questions that we received from one of our patrons is, and I think this is a great place to start, if you all will agree with me, is what your favorite part of your creative process is.
When I'm done, it's and I'm especially going through this right now. Writing is a very painful process for me, and I get a little crazy, or maybe a lot crazy, in that I try to talk to the characters as if they're real people. I have these conversations in my head, and I start to take on responsibility for, like, abusing them or not treating them well, or like, it's like, okay, well, this character is specifically created to die at some point, right? We need that character, their life, to be sacrificed so we can take the story someplace else. And then I get there and it's like, I don't want to kill this person. They put their trust in me. And so it's I shouldn't say when it's done is the best part, but there's, like, right now, that's what it feels like. There is a moment where I get into a groove, and it's, like, I can't type fast enough, and the ideas are coming fast and furious, and maybe I'm typing and then jotting stuff down on a piece of paper next to me as well. But yeah, that doesn't happen that often anymore. That's that's
Yeah.
that's like getting a good meal at Burger King. It just really doesn't happen. So
It's a slog most of the time,
Absolutely.
right? Like the work that, like, creative work in general is like
Yeah.
a slog most of the time. Every now and then the muse is with you
Mhm.
and you're like, oh, it's all working
Yeah.
so beautifully. The
Oh,
message
man.
that I want to give to the people is
Flowing.
so clear and flowing through me. I'm simply a
Divine.
vessel,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
And then most of the rest of, like, the other 99% of the time is like,
My life is a sham. I'm
yeah,
a fraud.
I am a fraud. What?
Let him in.
But I
Yeah.
know what you're saying, like,
Yeah.
about, like, the responsibility you feel to the character.
Mhm.
Like,
and there's also responsibility to
that also
the
is
reader.
a sign that it's good,
Mhm.
right? That it's
Yeah.
like
Oh,
you've
yeah.
created a full character that you care about enough
Yeah.
to feel
Yeah.
responsible for their fate. You know?
Yeah. But it's I think that might be like too much stress at times, right? It's especially if you're thinking about your characters as if they're real people, and there's these real consequences, and it's even sometimes it's not even that dramatic or that, like, neurotic, as it's just thinking about, okay, how can this can be conveyed, how can my artist draw this, can I explain it in a way to make sure that the artist draws it in the way that it's most beneficial. Do we have that trust? I was on the phone maybe 2-3 days ago with Sanford, my artist on Bitterroot, part of the team, and he wanted to change something, and I was like, you can't, there's two things he wanted to change, and one of them I was like, yeah, if you got it, you can change that, but you can't change this other thing. It's if you change it, it will wreck the next issue. It's going to wreck where we're going, and there's this like locking of the horns because he's an artist first and foremost, not I don't want to say not a storyteller because that's a little harsh. But he definitely has a different approach to story, and it's more of this visceral thing. And what's interesting is I love the visuals. Like if I can't read a comic if I don't like the art, but I can't come back to a comic if I don't like the writing. So yeah.
Yeah.
And that's totally true of Bitterroot. Like, the writing and the art are so fantastic. And it's interesting that she used the word visceral about like the art style of Sanford, because I think that that's super accurate.
It really is.
Like,
yeah.
it's really like in the moment. It's not necessarily about planting seeds about some future thing. It's about like, this is where we are right now.
In a
And it's
gorgeous
like, oh,
way.
yeah, of course,
my
I'm
God.
saying that in like the best, I mean that in the best way, that
Yeah.
it's like you are in that panel, and it's like that every panel. It's like you are in that panel
Totally.
in that moment.
Yes.
Well, and it's interesting because I'm, I will get into the subtext of what's going on in the scene in the panel, and I'll describe it. And so like our second arc of Bitterroot, the title of the overall arc is Rage and Redemption, and which is a kind of abstract concept, and I felt like, Chuck is my co-writer, we kept talking about at some point there's got to be the rage and there's got to be the redemption, right? And I think about it in definitely very abstract terms, right? So like especially the concept of redemption, and the concept of rage, and so I, as I'm doing rewrites on the script, I'll be like, okay, this is the panel where redemption happens, and it's like, but we're never going to have the character saying, oh, I feel redeemed, and I remember writing a panel description where it was like, these two family members, but they have their backs to each other, and one of them is facing the reader and the other has his back to the reader, and I'm like going, okay, and this symbolizes not only the split of the family, but it's this character moving away from us, the reader. This is the moment where we, Sanford never reads any of that stuff, so it's like he sent me layout for that page, and I'm like, yeah, you got the wrong character facing the reader. It's all that symbolism is gone, so, which, the readers might not even pick up on it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, I mean, like in our working style, Kelly Sue rarely gives like panel direction. I welcome it when she does, because sometimes I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Uh-huh.
And other times it's like, okay, I can steer the ship here more or less.
Yeah.
Like, I think I know what's happening.
Mhm.
But it did kind of like, when you were talking just now, it did kind of like raise a question for me, which is about theme, because you talked about like volume 2 is about the theme of rage and redemption.
Yeah.
And
why is that happening? Please go away. I'm not talking to you guys. I'm talking
Okay.
it's the laptop. Anyway, where in like the writing process for you does theme enter in? Is it like the first thing you think about? Like, I want this to be the theme of volume 2, and I'm going to write towards that theme. Or is it like you are kind of led by where you've left off, and it's like, okay, well, I know this is where the story should go, and I can apply a theme later.
I very seldom, I shouldn't say never, I very seldom know what my theme is going in. And so like we had to give Image a title for what our second arc was long before we started writing it. So we were going back and forth, and I was like, oh, let's just call it Rage and Redemption, because it sounds good, right? It sounds like a movie from the 80s or something with, it sounds like one of Steven Seagal's good movies, which there's only like one, but it's like Steven Seagal, he's feeling rage and redemption.
Yep.
So, for me, that concept of finding theme, there's certain themes that I'm always aware of that are in certain stories that I'm working on. but there can be more than one theme, and there can be stuff can be layered on top of each other, and that very seldom happens during the first draft. And I don't worry myself about it too much. It's like, let's get this first draft of the script done, and then we can start to find stuff. And if it's a story arc, a multiple issue story arc, 5 6 issues, um, I'm not even worried about the theme really coming to me in those first 2 issues or so. Like by the third issue, you start to figure it out. Um, and the thing is that I like to leave it open enough that the readers can bring whatever they want to it. And because I feel like the creative process isn't complete until someone has read it and they've internalized it and they've made it theirs. And that's such a tricky prospect, because I have no control over that. Sanford has no control over that. Everything from how fast do they read the book to how much time do they spend looking at a panel. And I can't remember the title of it. There's a comic that Gail Simone wrote it and Kat Staggs drew it, and it's basically a play on Freaky Friday, right? And it's like a housewife and a hitman, and somehow they switch places, right? And it's a great one. It's a really good story, but like, Kat Staggs does some incredible artwork with a lot of minute detail that if you're not studying the panel, you'll miss it. And I remember reading it, and there's like reading it, and then there's reading it. And I just remember like really reading this Crosswinds. That's the title, I believe, of the comic. And I was so absorbed in it, and it was like there were these little moments that I was like, it felt like she put them in there for me and me alone. And I saw her at a convention last year, and I was talking to her about it, and she was like really ecstatic that I had noticed some of these things, because they are those little details that a lot of people will gloss over. And it was down to even like the way the hitman was holding the gun in a panel, but it's not really the hitman because the housewife is inside the hitman's body. And it's clear she doesn't know how to hold a gun anymore, and it's little things like that. And the expression on her face as she's trying to figure out how to hold it. And, and that's, and it's interesting because I don't know how much of that was in Gail's script. I don't know what kind of description Gail gave, and I don't know what Kat brought to it. And I think I talked to Gail about it too. I don't remember, because I usually try to talk to both the entire creative team and let them know how much I appreciate something, because you just don't know, and I don't ever want to say, oh my God, Lisa's the greatest storyteller of all time. And then Kelly Sue is like, but I wrote that scene. That's,
I'm always like, yes, it is. I've done nothing.
And I'm always having to remind her that that's really not true.
Yeah.
She's done a lot.
Comics are it's hard to remember that as the writer. And part of that is because most people, you tell someone you write comics and they go, oh, so what, you put those little words in the balloons? And no, that's what the letterer does, you meathead. So
well, and also on top of that, Lisa and I we're like, Hex 11, we're ready for story review. And then Lynn is like, what's this and this and this and this? And we're like, oh shit. So also like your story is
I don't trust myself, like at a certain point, like as the artist, I don't trust myself because I'm like, I'm too deep in it.
Yeah.
Like, cause like, I feel like as the writer, cause like, I don't know. I mean, like, I feel like as the writer, it's like, okay, I can like sit in this scene and I can like write it out and I can like write the words and I can like talk about the symbolism I want to convey. To actually sit there and draw every kind of like piece of it, you really get to know every piece of everything that you're drawing. And so you have these thoughts of like, oh, well, I think that like this is the expression on the face of this character right now. And you get to know everything, like you get so deep inside of it because you're you know, director and actor and everything,
And cinematographer and editor and all that. Yeah.
photographer and everything, that it's like, oh, I've totally lost the thread. I don't know if this makes sense to anybody else but me.
Mhm. Yeah. And then I see it and I'm like, whoa.
And then Lindley comes in and is
It's like,
the
this doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any
So.
sense. We can make it make sense, and then it's going to be truly badass.
Right.
Fill in the blanks here. And then both
And
of
I'm
us are like,
please tell me that the way to make it make sense is with the words and not the picture.
And not
'cause I
the
don't want to
picture.
go and draw.
we almost always try to redo the words.
Oh.
But it's true that, and I don't know if this is something that you experience as well, David, with Sanford or any of the amazing artists that you work with, where you kind of are trading off being the forest and the trees. Like Lisa and I just recently had this conversation where it's like, oh no, it's your turn to be the trees and my turn to be the forest.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Do you come into experiences like that with the artists you work with?
That's interesting. I feel like I wouldn't describe it that way, but I'm gonna have to really think about that. There's a moment where the art comes back
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, okay, what is the artist given me?
Mhm.
And what works and what doesn't work? And by what I mean what works and what doesn't work is how well does it match up with the words that are supposed to be on the page or the ideas that are supposed to be on the page? And how am I going to make it work if it doesn't? Because my attitude is once it's drawn, it's drawn. It has to be a pretty major mistake. I've only, I think in my entire career, I've only asked for one thing to ever be changed. And there's been a bunch of times where I've been like, oh my God, I can't believe this. Well, what were you thinking? But there's this part of me, and I might get in trouble for saying this. There's a part of me that loves rewriting, like absolutely loves rewriting. And I'm talking once you get into the lettering phase, when the art is done. And I self-published a book. It's going to start shipping next week, The Hated. And like the lettering came back. So the book was 100% done. Lettering came back. And I was like, this writing is terrible. It's, you know, the dialogue was weak. Um, and I have a really bad flaw as a writer that I wasn't as aware of when I wrote it. I'm working with a new editor on Bitter Root, and she's pointed out like one of my ticks as a writer, and it was all over the first issue of The Hated, and it was just like, oh my God, like I didn't have anyone to edit it. I didn't have anyone to catch this stuff. And so I'm looking at a book that's, for all intents and purposes, done, that needed a massive rewrite. And it took me probably, because we did a Kickstarter for it, and at that point the book was done, right? It just hadn't been lettered. But by the time the Kickstarter was, we raised all the money had come, the lettering had started. And then it took me close to a month of having to like really sit down with it and go, okay, look at it panel by panel, scene by scene, and think about all of it. And it was painful, but it was like worth it, you know? And so I feel like it's almost like it's a combination relay race and sculpture, right? So it's like relay sculpture, right? So I get this lump of clay as the writer, and I start messing with the clay, and then I hand it off to the artist, and they look at it and go, what the hell is this? And I go, well, it's a grizzly bear and an alligator fighting to the death.
But you know,
Okay.
look like right.
Yeah. And then they take my grizzly bear and my alligator and they turn it into a chihuahua riding a unicycle, and then I fix it, you know. So
Oh
Yeah.
my God. Yeah.
that might be too extreme. I don't know.
Well, I mean, like, it's encouraging to hear that it's like,
Yeah.
the writing process doesn't really stop. Like, and that, I mean,
Yeah.
for me, it's like, I mean, issue one of anything is
Yeah.
hard to look back on that you've created, because it's like, oh, well, I could have done that better. But at a certain point, you just have to be like, but like, you know, this is where we were,
Mhm.
and this is like, it's not like it wasn't resonating with people.
Yeah.
So
See-
there's
Yeah.
so it's all fine. It's all fine, and it's fine to let it go and let
Yeah.
it go out once it's out, obviously. But it's like up until that like deadline moment where it's like, oh, but we could do this and we could do this and we could do this and we could do
Oh my
this.
God.
You do it. You know, up until the minute where it's like, oh, we're on deadline now and it has to be out right now.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, that's it. I can't do anymore.
Just
There it went.
There it went.
Oh.
And the way it went out is 100% fine.
Yeah.
Because that's when it had to go out. And that's like,
Yeah.
that's part of the whole thing is like, you can't just sit in your cave and keep on reworking this forever and ever and ever.
I mean,
Oh,
you can.
you
go
can, but
you can.
You can. I love that. I
But
want
then
to.
you don't get to have conversations with us on Meet Me in the
Exactly.
Hex.
that's true.
And
We're
I
not
want
recommending.
to. I want to quickly shout out because I didn't, and I should have done this before. But this question about the creation and writing process comes from one of our patrons and followers and friends of the Hex. His name is
Okay.
Ro Lamb. He is an amazing writer based in Atlanta. I've come to know him through Patreon and through his Patreon and through following Hex Comics. And so I just want to shout him out because he's an awesome creator. And everybody should follow him on Instagram, and you should check out his Patreon because his writing is gorgeous. And he was the one who sent in that question. So I just
Thank
wanted
you,
to say
Rolam.
thanks, Rolam.
Thank
You're
you.
amazing, and your work is
Thank
awesome. He's actually getting into comics, and he sent me a couple of his pages that were
Oh,
amazing. So yeah, I want to totally highlight this particular Patreon who asked this question and got such brilliant answers from both of you guys, by the way. So rad.
Well, I'll tell Lisa, this is interesting because see, I'm never better than my first issue. I feel like my first issue's it. And it's like I'm that person you go out on a first date with and you want to marry me after the end of the first date. But by the second date, you don't ever want to talk to me again. Like there's something goes horribly wrong, right?
I don't think that that's an accurate description of your writing.
Yeah.
But,
But
but
I
I,
appreciate
Yeah.
what you're saying, and that's your experience of it.
Absolutely.
But
But you're wrong.
But I wouldn't say that's my
Lindley's saying you're
reaction
wrong.
to it.
okay. Thank you.
Lindley
Thank
said
you,
you're
Kelly
wrong.
Sue.
You're wrong.
But yeah, it's I do feel like your first issue's it. You have to win them over, and
Like a debut album.
it is, and it's not just the debut album. It's the first track on that debut
On
album.
the debut album. This is where you make your biggest impression.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't really have any problem with the writing of issue 1.
Oh, that's
I
sweet.
was speaking specifically to the art of issue 1.
Well, yeah.
To like my kind of lane of it. But
Lindley is telling
Lindley
us
is
to shut
muted and she's telling us to shut the fuck up. So
it.
listen.
I
But
can
I
unmute.
only talk about
Yes.
I only talk about this stuff just to make anybody out there who is making a first issue of anything
Yeah.
to just feel more comfortable with it not being perfect.
Totally. Well, and we were
There's-
just. Oh, go
Nothing
ahead.
ever is.
It's there's no
Nothing
such thing
ever
as
is
perfection.
Yeah.
perfect. And that's not the point. The point is that you start the process of telling the story.
Yes.
And it as and that the first issue is like the debut song or the debut album. And it is a big deal because it's your splash moment. It's your hey, look at me. I'm gonna say these things. And that's it's a big deal. But it's just the beginning.
Yeah.
You got a whole long way still to go. So you can't if you get too caught up, you'll never get past it.
Yep.
You got to press
It's
forward.
Not a sprint. Which is why here
Don't.
in the Hex, we say don't sweat the technique
Yes.
because
Sweat it.
that's the surefire way to be a one-hit wonder.
Mm-hmm.
The I talk about this with other creators, but I also talk about this with my students a lot, which is that it's the 3P danger, the danger of the 3Ps, which those are permission, perfection, and payment. And if you're waiting for any of those three, you're never going to get them. You can't be waiting for perfection. You can't be waiting for permission. And it usually goes in that order. It goes permission, payment, and perfection sort of run hand in hand, right? Run neck and neck. And you don't necessarily get them. I mean, it's if you shouldn't be writing your great novel because you're hoping to make a lot of money off of it. You should be writing it because you've got a story to tell. Um, Again, that perfection is a load of crap, and the permission, it's, and I tell this to people all the time. I'm like, okay, I give you permission, go do it. Don't come back till it's done. And it's but I've seen it, and I never really thought much about that permission thing till I started teaching, and I saw it a lot with my students, and there would always be that student's like, well, I they would complain, and it was like, you haven't taught me what I need. That was, I would get that a lot. And I know sometimes, Kelly Sue, I don't know if you ever have this problem, and Lisa, you might even have it too, where it's like, I will get, I'll like, okay, there's got to be a book that tells me how to write better, and so I'm looking for the article, or I'm looking for the book that will tell me what I already know, but it's, and that's the permission part. That's where it's like, my neuroses.
I've watched like every single writing masterclass.
Yes. Yeah.
And at the end of it, I'm like, fuck.
I knew that. Yeah.
Already. I've read like Making Comics 100 times, and I'm like, I'm okay. Yep. I'm just gonna keep doing this forever and ever.
Yeah.
It's it's. I don't break the cycle. I do it. What I do try to do is I try to watch, like, I'll watch new videos or I'll read new things. I'm always looking for something new, but ultimately, it's like, no one's going to give me permission to start a book or a comic or a screenplay, and until you finish that first draft, you have nothing to show. Once the first draft is done, I feel like, okay, now the real work begins, because now you have this thing, and now you have to craft it, now you have to shape it. But permission is a doozy. I mean, I deal with that. I'm stuck there right now. The other thing that I substitute for permission is research. Like, I will research the hell out of something.
Oh my God, I'm feeling this connection so much right now, because it's exactly the same shit I do, where I'm like,
that's a big one.
I want to do this thing, but no one has like expressly told me that I can or should. So let me just do like a whole bunch of research.
Just really deep dive.
Let me just do a deep dive, because that's like productive.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah. And then the next thing you know, you're like, so when did Glenn Fry leave the Eagles? Did he leave before Don Henley? I can't remember. And then
Yeah, and it's I would love to sort of like do a study where we track the time where like research for a project turns into just like, who discovered watermelons? And then you're down a deep, deep hole.
Yeah.
And you missed like 5 deadlines.
Like, how much time did you spend doing that? Totally. Yeah.
And Lindley's got that look like, yeah, they do this all the time. Like, let me ask.
We have to revisit the production calendar like for the 50th time before she left for Texas.
Like many times we revisit the production.
Did either of you know that roller skates were invented in the 1700s?
Ooh,
I did not know this.
I didn't.
And how do I know this? It was a stupid bunch of research that I was doing, completely unrelated to anything I'm working on, but I was suddenly had to know the origin of roller skates. Like, I had to know.
It's funny that you should bring up roller skates, because I spent an afternoon being like, you know what? I really want a pair of roller skates. And then I was like, I'm just gonna like look online. They probably have some at a sporting goods store that I can order. But then I was like, well, no, I should definitely check like, what are the best roller skates to get, right? So then I'm reading these lists, and I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't realize that you could get some with shocks or whatever. So I'm like, okay, well, I definitely want the ones that are going to be supportive for my ankle. So I'm continuing on. And before I know it, it's like 4:00.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I found the roller skates that I wanted. Great. And then my baby needs his mother.
Yeah.
And then I'm done with that. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't get any writing done today. My life is crazy.
Yeah. This is how
But I do know which roller skates I need to buy.
Yes, and I am
Promptly go and break my tailbone and
Yeah.
then have to go to the hospital.
I am on the wait list for the roller skates that I want. They're made by Impala Skate, and they are holographic rose gold, if you would like to know.
Wow.
I Will not be available until September.
Take
Enough
that
about that.
money, put it in a money market account, make yourself $1,000.
Totally.
You are never going to
Is
use
that how it works?
in roller skates, dude.
How do you make money?
Wait,
Oh,
how
I-
do you
Wait,
make
true.
money?
Totally.
Just rent a pair. I don't
So
know.
I think this is actually talking about research.
Yeah.
And story and permission.
Yeah.
One of the things that but when I say we, I really mean myself, that I was very excited to talk about tonight is the kind of the intersection of the comic book medium and social issues. Because I feel like you just nail so much of this, bringing in this amazing, I don't want to necessarily say like statements or anything like that, but bringing in a lot of history and a lot of really timely stuff into this medium and into your work. And I would love for you to speak on that.
You know, it's interesting because I see it there
Mhm.
in my work, both my work and then in the case of Bitterroot, that's some, you know, as a writer, I'm collaborating with somebody else. I see it there, but I don't know how it gets there all the time. And so I think some of it is just like, this is what's in me, right? It's these are the things that are running through my head. These are the things that are important to me. But I do want there to be something. And so like that's going back to the Hated, where I was rewriting the dialogue, and it was because everything that was happening in the art spoke for itself. So there was no reason to have the character say anything that was like backed up or became redundant to the actions. And so for me, it's in terms of putting that message in there, it's really weird. Next week, Bitterroot #9 comes out, and because of the pandemic, it was delayed quite a bit. I think it was supposed to come out in, if I remember correctly, it was supposed to come out in April or May, but it was written in January, and so it was written before the pandemic, and the comps arrived last week, and I'm reading through it, and I was just like, holy crap, this reads like it was written a month into the pandemic. This is it was so, and it was like, okay, well, the key is that everything that the pandemic has revealed that's wrong in our society was wrong before we got here. All the stuff that we see, the protesting we see in the streets over Black Lives Matter, all of the issues that are coming back again in terms of Me Too, none of these are old issues, right? None of these just popped up out of nowhere. And I think if you're aware of it, if you're cognizant of it, those things that mean the most to you start to seep into your work more than ever. And there are things that I have to put in my work that it's and I'm not embarrassed to admit it, but I'm ashamed to admit it, if that makes sense. Like I don't write good female characters. They're just not there. I was raised on James Bond movies, and and a lot of toxic masculinity, and it comes through in the first draft of just about everything I write, where it's like I'll read something and then it'll be like, okay, wait a sec. First off, there's only one woman in this scene, in one scene, and she has nothing to do. And then it's like, okay, this is unacceptable to me as I am now. When I was like 20, I never would have noticed this stuff. I see it now, and that's the thing that I want to work on. And then as you start to work on that, then some of these things start to come through. And it's like, if you have a lead character who's a heterosexual man, And then for whatever reason, you go, okay, I can make this character a lesbian, you know, a one-eyed Chinese lesbian.
Yep.
You don't even have to change the dialogue,
I
and it
love
changes who that character is, right?
Yeah.
And these little things will start to build around, and those are the things that I love, right? I try to take my weaknesses, being, you know, again, weaned on toxic masculinity, things like that. And then I try to take those weaknesses and figure out, okay, how can I dissect them? How can I pull them apart? And um, I'm working on this project. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. It's working with a company to develop something for TV from another medium, and there's like no women in this world that's, you know, as it exists, something created in the 60s. And I was just like, well, you know, again, this is unacceptable.
Yeah.
Which, you know, which one of these three characters right here can become a woman? Boom, it's this one. And then the moment you make that decision, you're like, oh, wait a sec, the whole world has just opened up in a way that there's things that you can't do. And that's like, how do I put this? If you can begin to see characters who are outside of your scope of experience, your personal experience, as more than just props or extras, your story will grow. And
It's revolutionary.
yes,
Literally, like in the true term, it is a revolution.
Yep.
Mhm.
The whole process of the people, the story, the 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 consciousness, you know, of it all. And all it takes is that one simple thing.
Yeah.
You know?
I was just
I got to
watching.
watch,
kind of. Oh, sorry.
Hamilton again. And it's like, it's a story we've heard a million times. I mean, it's the history of America or whatever.
Yeah.
But you put those people, you put it into that construct, and you take that cast, and then you decide to put that music to those lyrics,
Mhm.
and it changes everything. And it's a story we all know. It's not, the story in and of itself is not like outer worldly.
Mhm.
But to be able to cast it in that way, it changes everything.
Yeah.
It
It
is
sets
so
you
deep.
You know.
So I was watching Hamilton today on Disney
I can't wait. I'm
Plus.
gonna watch it
I
tonight.
know I'm gonna watch it tonight.
I'm definitely gonna watch it tonight.
It was awesome. It was amazing. And about halfway through, I had this crazy idea, which was like, I want to see a production of Hamilton in which all of the gender roles are swapped, but they don't do anything to it's not in a joke way. So you would have a man playing, you know, men playing Angelica, Eliza, and Peggy, right? And but not have it be a joke drag sort of thing, and have a, you know, a woman playing Hamilton and Aaron Burr, and just let them bring the performance, right? And I was like, oh god, I want to see that so bad. And I'd never really thought along those lines before, you know.
It's like, I mean, because it's like it's the post-racial casting, the post-gender
Yeah.
casting, I think is super valuable, where it's no, we're not going to change anything about the lines. We're not going to change any lines. We're not going to change the character in any way. It's like, this is the point.
Yeah.
That we're all capable
Mhm.
of having these thoughts and feelings and these reactions, whether they're right or wrong.
Mhm.
We're all capable of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's why that shit's super important. I mean, I've never seen Hamilton before. That's why I'm excited to watch it. So I know I never saw
I have
it.
to have that reaction when everybody's like, Hamilton, I've never seen it.
Well, I've only.
I
That's
don't
true.
have like $700 to go see it on Broadway.
I know, and it's hard to get tickets, man.
I was gonna say I've never seen it.
And I'm
I've
not
heard
like
it.
part of this,
Yeah.
the musical live
You don't listen to
musical
musicals?
scene, where I'm like, oh, I know exactly when tickets are going on sale, and I've already signed up, and I'm like already pre-ready to like do this. I'm always like, oh, it's in town. I had no idea. So I haven't seen it, which is why I'm super excited
You're gonna
to
love it.
finally get to see it. But it's like, I'm already excited for the gender swap version of it.
Yeah.
Like, now that you mention it,
Yeah.
I'm already excited for that, and I haven't even seen this version of it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's a I don't know what happened to this project, because it was part of Pledge Music, which Pledge Music died a horrible death like a year ago. It was sort of the Kickstarter of music, and
Oh.
but there
never
was there was a bunch of financial malfeasance, and everybody got hosed.
In music? What?
Yeah, I know.
Heard of
But
it.
one of the projects that I had backed was all woman version of Jesus Christ Superstar, and yeah, I know. I was exactly that. Kelly Sue's reaction was mine. um, and so I pledged to the project. I've been following it forever, and then Pledge Music declared bankruptcy before. So it was like any project that wasn't done before they declared bankruptcy was screwed. And I was just like, this is the most amazing concept I've ever heard. And there was little snippets and pieces, and the only thing, my understanding is the only thing that they changed was I don't even think they changed the what do you call it if it's like a part is written to be sung by an alto or soprano. I don't even think they changed that. I think it was just
You want to check?
Lindley would know this, right? What's it called?
Yeah. She knows the difference between a mezzo
Transposing?
soprano and an alto and everything else.
Yeah, it would be like just transposing keys so that it
Yeah,
was
so they didn't change the original keys. I believe that was it. They kept everything as it was.
Yeah,
So
that would be
My
awesome.
chance to
Yeah.
be Judas.
Oh my
oh
god.
my god, wouldn't that's like he's my hero. You know that, right?
Oh my God. And actually tonight the roles, I will be playing the roles of Judas and Jesus.
Okay.
That's from Along Came Polly. Philip Seymour Hoffman.
It's so cool when you take situations like that though, and you don't change any about it except the human being that you've put in the role.
Yeah.
It forces your brain to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
I think to me, in so many ways, like especially with like the pandemic and the whole entire like nobody's safe until we're all safe, nobody's equal until we're all equal. You know, it's hard to blame people because we are just animals in there, and we get caught in these. You know, our brains, we get into these rhythms, and we get into this. What do we think reality is? And we sit down into these things, and we think this is who we are, and this is what reality is. But you come with something like that, like a gender swap situation, especially one that's potent, like a Jesus Christ Superstar, where people already have like deep connection to what they believe to be true.
Mhm.
You set in on something like that, and it literally opens people's minds, whether they want it to or not. And they may not like it, and they may argue about it, but it happened. Their brain is different now because
Yeah.
they were forced to perceive
process
something.
it.
Yeah.
Yes, they had to perceive something that they didn't know was possible.
Yeah.
And everyone doesn't have to like it, but it has to happen
Mhm.
to stir the brain up, because this can't persist, because we know it doesn't work. It's broken. The
Yeah.
system is broken, you know,
But I
but
think this, oh, go ahead.
you can't talk people into it. You have to show it to them in ways like this. That's why art is so fundamental to these kinds of things, comic books or
Yeah.
music or painting or dance, whatever it is.
Yeah.
you
I
do.
mean, like as a freelance artist, the way to when I was like first starting out, it was like the way to get work was to show this is exactly what you need to see in this moment. It wasn't like, oh, here's what I do and you can figure out how to place me where I fit.
Mm,
I have to
Yeah.
show you exactly where I fit.
yeah.
Like I have to show you an example of your problem being solved with me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's the same kind of thing where it's like, yeah, you need to show.
Mhm.
You can't just
Yeah.
say, oh, let's do a gender swapped Hamilton.
Why not?
Yeah.
And people are like, wait, huh? What?
Yeah.
Why?
That's- Yeah.
I can't
Totally.
fathom that. And it's like, you can once I show it to you.
Totally.
Mhm.
Which brings me to our potentially last question. I can't believe
Okay.
it's already almost 6:00.
No, bummer.
It happens
I
all
know.
the time with David. You're
With
so
all
easy
the
to talk to,
time. David, you're so easy to talk to.
So
I
just
just
move to LA. Come
Move
on.
to
Oh my
LA.
God, yes.
Every time we
I know.
talk to David Walker, I feel like all of us are like, I just really feel like I can be myself with you. No,
You do have that effect.
you have that effect on
You do
people.
have that effect on me.
But sometimes it's in the bad way. See, so
I really feel like I can be myself with you.
yeah. I can hate you if you don't like The Last Unicorn the same way I did. So
I mean, I really hate to say this.
yeah.
Like, part of me sort of like understands where she's coming from.
No, I get it too. I get it
However,
too.
The application is all wrong.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
that's the funny thing
I want
is
to make
like
that extremely clear.
I got where she was coming from. The
Which
key
is why
was
you said,
like
okay, I liked that
I
movie
liked
a
it.
lot. I thought it
And-
was a good movie.
Yeah.
and I never said I didn't hate the movie. I was just like it was good, you know. But
Jesus
I
Christ,
didn't. s-
dude, you're a
Yeah.
5-year-old man. You're
Okay.
not gonna be
Well, and
like
also,
lost in the dream world of the last
to
year.
that
I know.
movie as if
Come
you
on.
were like a 10-year-old.
Insane.
well, and also there is an argument to be made that The Last Unicorn is a little bit of like a feminist manifesto.
Yeah.
You know, it's a very heavily feminine themed story.
And I say that as someone who saw it exactly one time when I was 19.
I have seen
Okay.
it 11 times.
Me too.
Seen, like literally 3 days. But that question, this
Okay.
question
So I
that
see what you're saying with it, for sure.
you
yes.
get it. Do you think that there is, and I feel like this is almost a rhetorical question in a way, but do you think that there is a responsibility that is in the hands of storytellers and writers and artists to push those edges and to, you know, speak to the things that people may be triggered by, or to assert perspectives that are personal through your work, to, you know, like one of my most favorite books of all time is Lolita, because I found myself empathizing with somebody I never thought I could ever empathize with, which is this man who is essentially a pedophile.
Pedophile, yeah.
Yeah, and it broke my brain because I was like, oh, I understand why people burn this book.
Yeah.
Because
No,
they
I-
don't like empathizing with someone like this. But I mean, that's you know, one example. But if you could speak to that.
No, I think that I take that responsibility very seriously. It's one of the more difficult aspects of comics for me because comics is limited by space, the amount of space you have in a single issue, the number of panels on a page, things like that. So a lot of times we tell stories that are overly simplified. I call it playing to the back of the theater. You know, when you come from a theater background, they tell you play to the back of the house. So everything has to, you know, and I feel like comics, the language of comics is very much playing to the back of the house. But I do think that there's a tremendous amount of responsibility in the stories that we tell. Now, the key is how do you tell it to people so that you're not hitting them over the head, you're not beating them up with it, so that you are, so that if two people are watching it, one person can be like, wow, that was the most fun thing I've ever seen. And the other person is like, oh my God, that was the deepest thing. That the Last Unicorn is a feminist manifesto. And it's like, oh, I just thought it was about a unicorn, you know? It's like, but, you know, people turn to story, whether it's a comic book or a film or even music, they turn, because music is a story, they turn to story to so that someone can help them articulate the feelings and the thoughts that are just really difficult to articulate. So whether it's trying to convey how much you love somebody, or trying to convey the sense of loss that you feel, or trying to convey the uncertainty of where you belong in the world, right? That's what story is for. It helps us get through this stuff. And a lot of times a really good story that, you know, maybe a book or a movie that we see when we're 16, 17 years old is completely different when we watch it, you know, 10, 15, 20 years later. And what that story becomes and what that message is, as a creator, I have to know what I'm putting into it. And this goes back to something I said earlier. I know what I'm putting into it. I know what I would like people to get out of it. But once I'm done, it's yours, right? Whatever Lindley gets out of it, Lindley gets out of it. Whatever Kelly Sue gets out of it, Kelly Sue gets out of it. Whatever Lisa K. Weber gets out of it, Lisa K. Weber gets out of it. It becomes it becomes our thing, right? And I have, if you walk up to me and say, oh my God, that scene in Bitterroot what meant so much to me because it was totally this and it spoke to my childhood, I had no right to ever say to you that's not what it was. Well, let me rephrase that. If you come up to me and go, oh, it's so great because it's so pro-white supremacist and I, whatever, or if it's something that's unless that was my goal, which it isn't, but you know what I mean? I find it very troubling when people tell me how I'm supposed to feel about something.
Yeah.
Whether it's a song or a book or a movie, and I don't want to put that on to somebody else. I don't want them. And it's always funny when someone reads something into your work that you're like, totally wasn't there, but you just keep your mouth shut and go, yep. Well,
the truth does that. You just
and
put the truth out there and then let it speak for itself, because people define it how they're going to define it,
Exactly. And absolutely let them do it. Like, I mean, with my art too, whether it's through the comic or through like fine art, like when people come up to me and they say like, oh, this is what I see in this piece. I never dissuade them from that. Like, and you never should. No. It's like, I'm amazed that you saw that.
You did your job. Your job was to make your truth.
Right. And it's like, I saw what I saw while I was making it. And you saw what you saw, which adds this whole extra layer to it all. And I welcome it. I would never want to dissuade you from it, unless, like you say, you're somehow interpreting it in some hateful way. Like, that's not,
and that has happened to us.
Oh yeah, it's happened to me too. I saw. I made the mistake of reading a review on Amazon of Bitterroot, and they were like, "This is the most racist book I've ever read." And I was like, "Whatever,
Well,
and your mother's the ugliest woman I've ever seen, but I'm not going to say that, So.
I was going to say, I would love to see somebody come up to you and be like, I really love the shout out to white supremacy in this book. Just to see you pop them one.
Yeah.
I was talking to a group of college students, and there was one who was it was becoming clear that he didn't like the articles, the essays that we have in the back of the book, which are all dealing with history and things like that. And it was like, he was about to go there. He was about to say, well, I find them offensive, or something like that. And I was just like, hey, you don't want to say whatever you're about to say, because it's not going to end well for you. Yeah.
To quote our good friend Kelly Sue DeConnick, keep talking, asshole.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she's good at that. So.
Oh man. Her dropping it, I can't even remember. It was some dude.
There was some artist who was saying some shit
spouting
about
some
ladies.
stupid shit about ladies, and she just comes in with the keep talking, asshole.
Yeah.
She has said that to me. She has said it to me because I have definitely slipped up around her, and I haven't talked to her.
Is a woman who gives no quarter.
Yeah, she does. She's none, and we're fortunate. I'm fortunate enough to consider her a friend. I honestly don't know if she considers me a friend. That's part of the beauty of our friendship.
That's what makes it beautiful.
But I can say unequivocally that Kelly Sue DeConnick is one of my biggest influences as a writer at this point, but not just as a writer, as a person. And a lot of what I do, it's like, okay, what would Kelly Sue say about this? There's a few other writers that I've known for a long time. Jen Van Meter's one, Chelsea Kane's another one who I'll reach out to from time to time. But I've actually, there was a project that I was offered a few years back, and I called Kelly Sue up and I was like, can I talk to you about this? And we were talking for a while, And then she goes, "Sweetie, you've already made up your mind. You're not going to do this thing." And I said, "Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm right in not doing it." And she was like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, you are." And I wouldn't tell you to not do it, but and it felt good because it was because I think there was a time in my life where I wouldn't have thought about some of the issues in that in this particular project. I would have been thinking more about the payday and things like that. Um, and there's a point where, I mean, we're all still works in progress, and none of us are perfect, and we're also the product of our screwed up upbringings, and the culture that surrounds us. But it's like there's no excuse for anybody to be the same person they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, um, especially in the more problematic capacities. No one wants to hear, "Oh, you're totally sexist. That was the most misogynist thing I've ever heard." And it's like, which I've had people say to me, and it's like, "No, I was just trying to be funny." And then it's like, you know, "Oh, wait a sec. Yeah, no, that wasn't funny." What I just told someone the other day, I said, "Yeah, no, what's funny at 25 might not be funny at 45, and you might realize how bad it truly is."
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And so,
I
yeah,
hope that you do.
yeah,
You'd want to
Yeah,
hope
I
that
mean, like, it's,
you can
if
figure
you
it
can
out.
look at your work and say, like, oh yeah, I could have done that better.
Yeah.
Like, not just like technically, but culturally.
Yeah.
yeah.
Or just
done
begin to
that
accept,
better.
growth,
It's
growth
like
is
you see
real.
that. Oh, go on. Sorry.
Now I say growth is real. You can't punish yourself. Kind of just going back to kind of the beginning of this conversation about like the first issue and that you can't punish yourself for the thoughts you had when you were having them.
Yeah.
But you can punish yourself for not growing.
Yes.
And not understanding and not accepting truths as they've been presented to you or new realities and being resistant to that change. That is a problem, because you're not doing your work. You're not doing the work.
And as we wrap this up, I think one of the things that we as creators have to think about is, well, what is it that we want to get across in our work? And I was talking to my students about this. I said, sometimes you have to hurt people. If your story is about like a homophobic serial killer, you got to make that character homophobic. You got to make them say mean and hurtful things in order to get across what you want to get across. Now, if it's only mean and hurtful for the sake of shock value, then your story is going to suck anyway. And this comes down to language, and I'm becoming more and more aware of it. There's certain words that carry a lot of weight with them. Certain words that are not can be very insulting and hurtful, and you have to ask yourself, okay, why is this character using this word right now? Is it does it reveal something about the character itself, or is this just going to shock the reader? And that's where I'm not a big fan of what do they call them, sensitivity readers per se.
Yeah.
But I am a big fan of just reaching out to your friends and going, hey, is this homophobic, or is this sexist, or is this
just
ableist?
not coming across as honest or
The
authentic
way I intended.
or necessary?
Truth. It comes back to truth.
Yeah.
And that's a tough thing, because a lot of times as creators, we don't want to come across as being mean or hateful, right? But we do want to have a compelling antagonist in our story. We do want to give our heroes motivation to go out, beat up the bad guys, and so if your characters are crafted, well crafted and true, there might be some aspects of them that hurt. I think it's interesting, like the movie Black Panther is a prime example where everybody's along with Killmonger up until a point, and then they're like, okay, wait a minute, wait. We're talking about killing everybody. It's like,
I feel like we spend a lot of time talking about like villains.
Yeah.
And like especially like we talk about teaching, and we teach a couple classes as well, or mentor a couple classes as well. And it's like So so often a lot of people will just like make a villain that's bad for bad's sake. And so they'll toss out a bunch of slurs, they'll slap ladies around, but it's just like, oh, well, you know, it's just showing how evil this character is. And it's like, yeah, but why?
Yeah.
Like, where is this coming from for this villain? Like, you have to, like, every character you write deserves to be, like, sit in. Even if they're a totally hateful, horrible person, you have to sit in them.
Yeah.
You have to understand them in order to, like, really, like, elevate the story. And so even if they're racist, sexist, just the most monstrous beings, you have to be with them. And you have to think about that when you're writing them, when you're drawing them, when you're creating them, is like, what is it for me to be in this person?
Yeah.
Why would I ever think this way? Why would I ever speak this way?
Because if you don't do it well, you just end up with the president of the United States, and nobody can sit with that. You know, it's like
it's a terrible story.
He's
living a terrible story.
He's the worst villain. He's like a bad Bond villain. You know, he's worse than Dr. Evil.
He's not a good Bond. He's bad Bond because it's like there's no reason for him.
Well, and also if you are creating villains that are just evil, or they're stereotypes of evil people, whatever that means, right? I feel that you're kind of contributing to the sowing of division. Instead of
elevating the
something new about conflict. You know, which again goes back to truth, and it goes back to you can't have good without evil, and all of these, you know, philosophical and universal truths. And so much of that has to be incorporated into what you're creating. And I feel like we've totally come full circle. We've also gone over time by like 100 minutes.
I want to say this though.
We've gone over by 14.
We've gone over by 14.
Exaggerating a little bit.
I want to say this though. I want to do this again with David, because I thought we just touched on it briefly, but I think it would be a really great conversation to talk about the payday versus the art.
Yes.
As someone who's really lived in that reality for a long time, there's so much to be learned and discussed, I bet, from your experience in that, because it's a very, I mean, if you're trying to make a life as an artist, it's a very real conversation you have to have with yourself and with those around you, or whoever's involved in the projects or whatever. But I think that is definitely a masterclass worth having with you if you'd be
absolutely
willing to
I have like part 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Yeah. We should call it David Chronicles, and it's just interviews.
Basically, like, will you be my friend forever?
I think we could work that out.
This has been so awesome. I feel like, again, there's going to be several parts, because we could talk to you about this and about you and about your work literally forever. But we can't do it tonight. So
because you got to watch Hamilton.
Exactly. We've got to watch Hamilton. So we want to say thank you so much for meeting us in the Hex.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to hang out with the three of you. And I would love to do this again. This is really great.
Awesome.
And just keep in mind, so I'm saying this on the record for whoever's listening and watching right now, that as individuals and as a team, you're so inspiring to me, that it really, like, I'm ready to go do work right now, but I'm not. I'm gonna eat dinner and probably go to bed early, and exactly. I don't drink, but other things are legal here in Oregon. So
David, obviously it goes without saying the feeling is mutual.
So mutual.
We can't wait to have a million more conversations.
A million more of these.
On and especially offline.
So huge shout out to all our patrons. If this finds its way outside of our Patreon, subscribe to our Patreon. Come and be a subscriber. Join us in the Hex.
Conversations like this.
We have fantastic ones like this, and we're going to have more with David Walker. So we will see you on our Patreon.